we're going to look at one of the best options possible out there to start a company, corporations. Don't be afraid thinking that corporations are always big and huge, because they're not. Okay, a lot of them are, and they get an awful lot of traction, and they have a lot of opportunities because of the business structure that they have. But no, they don't have to be big to be a corporation. We'll talk about the three different kinds of corporations. So we've talked about two business types already. We talked about the sole proprietorship and the partnership. Both of them have a thing called flow-through taxation, which means you file one tax return. Okay, corporations now, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit. Only one of them really has a similar structure like that, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But normally we have a thing called a C-Corp. For years, I always called it a C-Corp because everybody calls it C-Corp. And finally somebody said, some student had the gall to say, what does the C stand for C-Corp? I didn't know. Okay, and I've talked about it for 15 years. The C stands for conventional, nothing exciting. It'd be kind of cool. C stands for, and some fabulous thing. No, it stands for conventional. Corporations are filed in the state. It's not local, it's not city, it's not county, it is a state filing. It's that way in every single state. So every state will have a different type of methodology as to how you go about filing it. In our case, you file it with the state of California. So you have a California corporation. California has an awful lot of rules and regulations that other states simply don't have. If you look at the overall structure for business in California, you'll see a lot of different ways that people write things. And if your local chamber of commerce does the right thing, they always pretend that, oh yes, our state has the best, rah, rah, rah. California does not. The reality of California, we typically rank about 42 to 47 out of 50 on the bottom. Okay, so California has one of the worst business environments for business to start. We just happen to have a lot of sunshine and cool people like you and me. Okay, so that being said, the C Corp you file with the state, and the biggest thing is when you have a corporation, it creates, as soon as you file that paperwork and do your business through the corporate structure, it creates a separate person from you. That's a big deal. It is not you. So that way, if something goes sideways and you get sued and it goes past the structure of your insurance and the actual assets of your business, they don't come after you, your house, your car, and your personal assets. It is a separate entity, and therefore, as a corporation, it is looked at upon the law that all the assets of the corporation are separate from your personal assets. That is a big deal, especially in California, the place where there's too many lawyers trolling for people's personal money to sit down and line their own pockets and that of their clients. So that being said, the C Corp is the beginning of a series of things we'll talk about, because we were talking about three different types of corporations. But all corporations have the separate legal entity, which is critical and reduces the overall liability, which makes your life better. Now, in California, just so you know, when you file for a corporation, okay, the first year the corporation is almost free by the time you're all done filing. You have to file. By the time you're done, the bylaws are the biggest pain to file. Normally, you look at it, creating bylaws for a corporation, anywhere from 8 to 14 pages long. You can get them online for free, but more than likely, you're going to probably pay for them. And there's several different ways to help you out there. My preference is LegalZoom. Now, they don't give me a dime to mention that. It's just that that's what I use because I don't feel like writing those corporations. I made a corporation before by borrowing a book out of the library. It's not rocket science to do. You just got to file the forms and follow the process. You don't need to pay anybody. You can do this yourself. You do not need an attorney to file a corporation. Yes, it's easier, but it's far more expensive from free versus $5,000. Okay, this is a much easier way of doing it. Now, I don't recommend you start out with a C Corp. A C Corp, the structure itself is prone to lots of paperwork and filings with the state and federal governments and sometimes the county governments and occasionally the city government. But I would recommend not starting with the C Corp unless that's a larger corporation you're automatically funding in the process. But we'll talk about the other two types shortly. You'll find some confusing types of corporations, read about them. I'm including them here only so you can actually see them. I am not testing you on any one that you see on this list over here. I'm going to look at C Corp, the LLC, and then on top of that, the S Corp. But this, You'll see these out there, and this is only for informational purposes, and will not be part of our testing. But you need to know that they're out there and they're different critters. The advantages of corporations, I've already mentioned the first one, which is huge, limited liability. You can raise more money for investment. With all the corporations, you can sell parts of your company to somebody else, they can have part ownership of it, and you get money for it. Hey, let's go have lunch together. I need a couple $100,000. Okay, you don't say that in the invitation. You launch that in the middle of your lunch or at the dessert time or when you have lots of alcoholic beverages and are mindless befuddled in the process. That being said, I'm just kidding. Kind of. Anyway, then you have the size of the corporation. They can actually grow as big as you want. They have perpetual life. They're hard to kill by the time you're all done because you're selling stock out there. So how do you get rid of it? Okay, because it has that perpetual life. If you want to transfer the ownership, you just sell the stock in it. You may sit down and be as fabulous as Elon Musk and have this giant corporation. I own 12% of the stock. Well, that means that 88% of the stock is owned by other people. You can liquidate your own stock, but those people, that corporation will still go on until they all sell it or the whole corporation dissolves in bankruptcy, which is a whole different critter. If you want to just get out and retire, you sell your stock. You can attract talented employees because recall that 81% of all revenue comes into corporations. Therefore, you have a lot more money generally. And so attracting employees is much easier than a teeny tiny corporation. And you have a clear separation of ownership and management. Look at the chart over here. As you see over here, the owners are the stockholders. They're at the very top. The stockholders choose the CEO of the organization. Now, a lot of times the stockholders have a vested interest and they're interested in making money. That's why they bought the stock. So that being said, they're going to choose the best person. And sometimes the CEO isn't the best person. If you go back historically, probably the most famous case is Apple. Apple, once upon a time, it was started by Stephen Jobs. It was going along and doing okay, but Stephen Jobs, if you read his biography, and by the way, if you're going to go into business, I encourage you to read multiple biographies of great entrepreneurs, including Stephen Jobs. He was mercurial. He would be a royal pain to work with. It doesn't mean he wasn't a genius, though, because he was a genius and he's a great salesperson in the process. But the reality was the board fired him. His own company, he started it. They just outvoted his 8%. So by the time it was all done, he started another company called Pixar, and lo and behold, that made an awful lot of money. And then eventually Apple says, Steve, can you come back and save us? So Steve came back and saved them, and Apple went on to become what it is today, a spectacular corporation based upon some good, solid financial principles and some really smart business practices too. First of all, established by Stephen Jobs and then carried through by the current person at the time of this recording is Tim Cook. So that being said, you have to make certain those stockholders are happy and then they choose a board of directors based upon stock. So if you own a massive amount of stock and you get one vote for every share of stock. If you have 12 million shares of stock, you get 12 million votes. You can probably vote yourself right in, depending upon how much stock is issued out there. So you have a board of directors, they hire your officers. By the time it's all done, the officers hire the manager and the employees. So you have that going on for you. A disadvantage of it is the initial cost. There's more cost than sole proprietorship and a partnership, a lot of paperwork. There's double taxation. Here's how that works. A corporation makes a profit. They make a profit. They pay the federal government 21%. They pay the state government in California 8.77%. Okay, so that's it. They pay all that. And then they issue a dividend. Now, wait a minute. 21% and about 9% in California. That's 30% of all the profit. Now they're going to sit down and issue a dividend. Okay, a dividend is when they take all the profits and they divvy it up. They says, okay, let's give all the shareholders money. Then that same amount of money that you distribute as profit is sent out to all the shareholders. If you're on the low end, you're getting paid 28% taxes. You're already paying 30% corporate taxes to the federal and state government. And then on top of that, you're going to pay 28% on top of it. You're paying 58% of the profit of the company is being paid in taxes. Double taxation. You get taxed as an individual, and the corporation gets taxed as a corporation too. If you're a major shareholder, boom, you lose an awful lot of money in taxation. 2 tax returns, that's a negative. The size of corporations can get much bigger. They're hard to terminate, even if you want to. And you might have a problem between the stockholders versus the board of directors versus the management. So you have some conflict over there. Some of the big companies out there, Amazon dominates planet Earth, followed by Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, Apple, United Health, CVS Healthcare really made an appearance just 2 years ago in the top 10. ExxonMobil's one of the few remaining oil companies in the top 10. Actually, 3 years ago, this top 10 actually had three oil companies in it. Alphabet, and then McKesson, which is a drug company, and Cencora in the top 10. So these are really the largest corporations in the United States. You also have private corporations where the stock is not available to the public. Now, pay attention to this list over here. You'll see something very interesting. You have on the top 10, you're seeing three of them are accounting firms. Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Ernst & Young. They're up there. They're world giant accounting firms, and they're private. That tells you something. It means they're making an awful lot of money. So Coach, Albertson, Deloitte, Mars makes an awful lot of money. That's why Elon Musk, he wants to get on Mars because he knows that there's an awful lot of money to be made there. Publics and I'm just kidding, by the way. Okay, so that being said, so these are your top 10 privates. But even as big as you are, sometimes you can make huge mistakes. Here's some of the great mistakes made over the years. Okay, you had Atari. They had a bad game, and they made so many of it that they had to bury a lot of them in a New Mexican landfill. Blockbuster videos. Once upon a time, Blockbuster in 2007 had an opportunity to partnership with Netflix and actually buy them out. Nobody's going to go for streaming. They're going to continue to run them over here. Most of you never even heard of Blockbuster because Blockbuster died in 2011 because of a really bad decision making, and they passed up that opportunity to get one of the world's largest streaming services, Netflix. Coke, the new Coke, they came out with it and they broadcast, yes, new Coke, new Coke. It lasted a whole 77 days. And they would get 1,500 complaints a day. Bring us back to Coke, bring us back to Coke. So they went back to classic Coke. By the way, did you know that Coca-Cola, the original formula in it, had a bit of cocaine in it? Yes, and that's why it empowered the previous generation to go uphill and nonstop and go 17 miles to school one way and 22 on the way home. Now, that being said, okay, the Pan America, after the bombing, the airline blamed the government after the victims filed a $300 million lawsuit. Pets.com, I'm so surprised about it and everything else. They went bankrupt after making a huge splash out there. Big companies can make big mistakes. So that being said, just because they're big doesn't mean they are immune to failure. Anyone can incorporate. California, you file your fee. The problem in California, if you're a teeny tiny company, your first year, you don't pay anything to the franchise tax board, but after that, you will always pay $850 for the rest of the life of your corporation. So California is going to make money. When you go to other states, that is a huge figure because most states charge underneath $100 for the annual fees. California, of course, everything's bigger in California, including our taxes. The stock is not normally issued to outsiders, okay, when individuals incorporate, so they don't share the advantages of large corporations. And a lot of times, the major advantages are limited liability and the possible tax benefits that you have. Anybody can incorporate, but it does alleviate you of that giant liability issue, which is why I want to encourage you to think now that if you're going to file for your own company, you may want to consider a corporation, not a C-Corp to start. You can always convert to a C-Corp later on once you're fabulously successful and contribute to the IVC Foundation. Just kidding, maybe. But that being said, anybody can incorporate. Oldies but goodies, these ones have been around for a long time. Caswell Macy Perfume and Soap. The Hartford Courant, a newspaper that survived all this time. Baker's Chocolate, what a sweet company out there. Ames, a tool company. King Arthur flour. You know for sure that King Arthur flour makes an awful lot of dough in the process. You'll figure that out eventually. Okay, then moving along. Insurance with Cigna, pencils on Dixon. You can always, they always write in a good solid bottom line. And alcohol, by the time you're all done, the stockholders, and they have a bad year, they can always sit down and drink enough of their product to forget about it. So that means that these are the 10 oldest American corporations. Look at the ages on them, though. Pretty incredible that they survived so many years here in the United States as a corporation. C-Corps, All corporations are a legal person. The C Corps, you have the advantage of multiple kinds of stock. General Motors, if you go check out General Motors, you'll see a dozen different kinds of stock. They can sell stock for separate entities inside the organization. And so you have that wonderful opportunity to have a continual way to make money by issuing more shares of stock and so on, especially in the C Corp. And then you have that perpetual life aspect of it for good and for bad. C Corps or corporations in general is a great way to build a business. We're going to talk about the other two types of corp shortly, which I think are really positive, especially if you want to start your own business. Take care.